Welcome to the Debt Doctor podcast, where we deliver the definitive prescription for navigating distressed real estate debt. I'm your host and America's most qualified debt doctor, Bill Bymel. I've spent my career investing in, diagnosing, and reviving thousands of distressed real estate situations. The Debt Doctor prescribes proprietary remedies to help you identify, acquire, and monetize undervalued real estate assets. Each episode gives you insider access to the strategies top cohorts use to transform market volatility into double-digit returns. If you enjoy what you hear today, hit the follow button, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and please share your support with a quick review. You can find me on the web at billbymel.com. Thanks for joining this episode of The Debt Doctor. Buenos dias, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Bonjour or buenas noches. No matter where you are reaching us from today, welcome to another episode of The Debt Doctor. Today we continue our conversation about the reverse mortgage, a very particular piece of real estate debt that only exists, to my knowledge, here in the United States of America. We're going to talk about the U.S. reverse mortgage program. This is part 2 of a 2-part podcast. The first episode was just released prior to this, talked about some of the background of what the reverse mortgage is, who the big players are, and also being insurance companies, mortgage lenders, and the fact that the program is federally insured. So just as a recap to that, the reverse mortgage, it's most commonly referred to as a home equity conversion mortgage now. HECM, HECM, HECMs. So if you hear me talking about HUD HECMs, those are the reverse mortgages. These let homeowners that are 62 years of age or older borrow against the home equity in their home without making any monthly payments. That's why it's a reverse mortgage. The interest instead accrues on the outstanding balance of the loan until the loan is repaid, when either the borrower sells the loan prior to death or moves out permanently or dies, and then the home has to be sold. Borrowers have to continue paying property taxes, the insurance, and they maintain the home. So you're not making payments to a bank. In some cases, the payments are actually being made to you on a monthly basis until you die. But the borrower who is living in the property, someone who has taken this reverse mortgage in their 60s or 70s, you've got to still pay property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. So you could go into default on this thing if you don't at least do that. There's HUD-approved counseling. It's actually mandatory. So people that enter this program, it's a very highly regulated, very hands-on program. And the most important thing about it is that this is a non-recourse debt. And we haven't done a deep dive into what recourse versus non-recourse debt means on the Debt Doctor podcast. We will do a coffee with Bill just to talk about that. But, basics of it are that recourse debt means that you personally guarantee the loan, where if anything happens, you owe that money back. If the property value doesn't cover the loan, you'd be personally liable for the difference. That's how a standard mortgage works, by the way. One of the big things that happened after the great financial crisis, when all these mortgages were upside down, was people that took these mortgages. A standard mortgage is a recourse mortgage, meaning, yes, you're taking the loan against the value of the property that you're buying, but it's really a personal mortgage. In the post not 2009, when everybody was upside down and giving their homes back to the bank, one of the big fears was, well, if I'm giving this property back to a bank, at 300,000, but my mortgage was 500,000, the bank only gets 300,000 back selling the property today. In theory, with recourse mortgages, banks could and do come after the borrower who was foreclosed on for what they call that default judgment, that negative deficiency judgment is actually what it's called, a deficiency judgment. So the fact that HUD HECMs are non-recourse means that if the heirs, if the property is upside down at the time that the borrower dies, the estate is not responsible. Any negative balance comparative to the equity in the property is non-recourse to the estate, to the family, to the borrower if they're still alive, whatever it might be. So that's a very important thing, and a very important protection for people who take these mortgages out. Um, in order to qualify, you've got to be 62 years of age. You've got to be living as only your principal residence. You can have a mortgage on the property, but a lot of people who take these mortgages own their homes outright to begin with, and they use this as a way to get a little chunk of cash up front and some monthly payments for the rest of their life. Now, the most common 99% of these mortgages out there in the reverse world are FHA insured, meaning HUD, who I refer to as the HUD HECMs. HUD, the same people that insure first-time home buyers. They're your start of life in the home ownership. They are also insuring end-of-life home ownership with this reverse mortgage program. To give you some stats on it, it's not a huge program. There's less than 500,000 reverse mortgages outstanding as of 2023. I think that number is obviously over 500,000 now. More people are starting to take reverse mortgages than are dying now, so the trend is starting to build upward again now. Its height, this program's been around for a while, and the height of the program was 111,000 mortgages that were originated in the reverse program in 2009. So that was right as the market had evaporated. You had a lot of people in their 60s turning to the reverse mortgage program because they couldn't sell homes. But and then it kind of fell off an edge. There was a lot of suspicion about the program until about, I don't know, 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when there was actually a major push started with now the industry's largest advocate, famous celebrity Tom Celich. Yes, Magnum PI is now the spokesperson for one of the largest originators of this program, Finance of America. About 8 years ago, he came out with an ad that really it was very interesting. It was dramatic, and it was like, look to the camera. He said, "Yeah, I used to be suspicious of this program, but it turns out it's really, really genuine. The program, the industry has very cleaned up its actors. So we're seeing an increase in the number of people that are taking these out. In up actually, there's anywhere from 30 to 60,000 new home originations of this, and we expect to see a lot more. But let's just talk about what's available in this market. I mean, if you only got about 500,000 borrowers actually using this program, well, then what does that mean in terms of market share? In total, just to give you an idea, since 1990, when this program was first started, so about 35 years old, over 1.5 million homeowners have used the HUD HECM reverse mortgage program. That's quite a bit over 35 years. I guess, it's an average of number of Americans eligible for the program. Well, if you look at the census figures, 79% of home adults older Americans were homeowners in 2022. Some of them are couples, obviously, that share a home. Fannie Mae research found that Americans age 60 plus represented 44% of all homeowners. If 82 million owner occupied housing units are out there, that implies about 36 million households. Then, when you figure in the equity, in order for these mortgages to work, you have to either have a very small mortgage already or you have to own the home free and clear. And in 2023, First American reported that 42% of owner occupied homes were owned free and clear. So that's quite a significant amount. And 78% of those mortgage free homes were owned by people that were 55 or older. So, the estimate is that there's probably 36 to 48 million households that have a characteristics of being eligible to use this program. If markets deteriorate, if anything happens, there's a segment of that population that just didn't invest properly, or the only thing they invested in was the homes that they live in. So we could see this program really explode in terms of the people taking the program out. What sort of the pros and cons are that, a reverse mortgage lets seniors tap into their equity through a loan, which is a tax-free income. It doesn't affect your Social Security. Instead of making monthly mortgage payments, and some of these you get monthly mortgage payments, it's non-recourse, etc. You got to watch out for your upfront fees. You got to make sure that you're really clear on the numbers and how it works. But this is a very good program. So where we talked about that all in the first part of the episode of the first part, that was a recap. But then what happens is when the borrowers do pass away, HUD has to step in, buy the mortgage, first and second lien mortgage, back from the bank. HUD already owns the second. They're buying the first lien mortgage and they're paying the insurance to the banks that are owning these loans while the borrowers are still alive. Once the borrower is deceased, bank sells the mortgage back to HUD. These start to build up an inventory. When you do the statistics on it, you've got 500,000 of these things that are out there, and you've got another 50,000 a year that are being added. You've got probably 20 or 30,000 a year that are dying in the program itself. It's very unclear the number of statistics. You can see the number of that the inventory that the government's building up of insurable mortgages is increasing. And that's also just by a pure numbers standpoint, increasing the number of loans that come back into the taxpayer coffers and have to be dealt with. And the way that HUD has chosen to deal with this is through the reverse mortgage sale program. And that is HUD Office of Asset Sales has a program where, this is a little bit of the uh, ominous um, Tom Selleck reverse loan. This is the start of the Tom Selleck era of reverse mortgages back in 2000, like about 9 years ago. He got involved with these guys, and he's been like a spokesman for the industry ever since. But more importantly, let's get on to where we are right now. Part two, what we promised here in this episode was um, a look behind the curtain of how we get involved in the HECM program. Now, this is after the borrower has deceased, and the borrower's spouse, if there was one, has also deceased. And in order for HUD to pay the insurance to the banks that are insured, they have to deliver the property, a certain condition. They have to, in most cases, they're trying to deliver these properties either vacant or, vacant if possible and secured. In some cases, HUD is taking the ownership of the mortgage back while there's still heirs or someone else living in the property, squatters in many cases. So the National Servicing Center deals with that. As mentioned, there's about 500,000 of these mortgages active in the system. There's probably about 50,000 of them at any given time working their way through a default. 10 to 15% of the population of this pool that are working their way through some sort of default. I know for a fact through conversations with people inside the government that there's somewhere between 9 and 10,000 of these mortgages right now that are available and that are in the pipeline, coming down the pipeline where the borrowers have either deceased or maybe the borrower's spouse is still alive or both have deceased and they're just trying to get the property vacated or find the paperwork, whatever it might be. And that's just the near term, 9,000 of these homes. So what did HUD do? In about 2016, 2017, they switched to what they call these HUD-held vacant loan sale programs for home equity conversion mortgages. And for those of you that are listening to this podcast as opposed to watching us on YouTube or on Spotify, I am sharing a public report drawn directly from HUD's Office of Asset Sales website. This is where they discuss their vacant loan sales. They have single family loan sales. They have joint venture programs. HUD often posts a certain amount of data just publicly here on the website. So I pulled the most recent report, March of 2025, a report to the commissioner. This is a recent report done just here in 2025 under the Trump administration. A report to the commissioner on, what is this program? What's the result of it? So just to give you a little bit of an idea, there has been since 2016, there have been 16,000 of these mortgages sold. Not, by the way, it sounds like a lot, but to some of you, it may not sound like a lot. It's not. As I mentioned, I've been told that there are right now 9,000 sitting in HUD's inventory ready to be put through this program at some point in the next few years. And you can see that HUD has gotten pretty good at selling, a couple thousand a year. From what I understand, now that they've fine-tuned the program, they're looking to ramp it up because the number is increasing greater than they are selling these things for. But these balances here are in hundreds of millions, right? So 300 million, 171 million, 120 million, 201 million, etc. These are the total number of loans. So you've got a total of about $4.4 billion. That's what this number is here. About $4 billion of debt that has been sold in the last 9 years since this program started. In order to, you have to be a qualified citizen. You can't be related to HUD. You can be a for-profit entity. You can be a non-profit entity. You have to be able to prove that you have the money to bid at one of these auctions. But there is very little. There are people who have come in, and the minimum number you have to buy out of any in total on any auction is 5. There are 20 minimums and there's 5 minimums, but you can see there's a few of these companies down here, mostly nonprofits that have bought small numbers of loans through various pools. There's been one company that's kind of dominated it and bought the bulk of it, a couple of them actually, 2 or 3 right at the top that are over 1,000 loans that they bought over the last couple of years. This one here, Housing Opportunities Mortgage Assistance, this is a nonprofit we are affiliated with. So these are the 170 loans that we bought in the last 3 years, totaling about just under 80 million of loan balance. And I think what's important to understand is, this is not an ordinary program. This is a niche program. Like I will say that in many ways, it is relatively a fix and flip real estate play. So in the world of fix and flip real estate investors, one would think that this program would make a lot of sense for people to come here and start buying these loans. The problem is, for most investors, is that it's not as easy as that. You've got to know the foreclosure business. You've got to know the laws. You've got to, in this case, the added element of having to deal with heirs of an estate. You've got to deal with, in many cases, borrowers who have died intestate, meaning they don't have a will, they don't have anything planned, so you need to go through a public probate situation, or even if they do have a will, you have to open probate. And what's crazy is that the laws vary from state to state, and sometimes within jurisdictions, and certainly all around the country there are nuances, mostly on the state level. So you have to know at least 50 different nuances about a how to foreclose a reverse mortgage. It's not necessarily the same as foreclosing a regular mortgage. So that is created a very high barrier to entry in terms of, if you're looking at this, it's certainly something to consider as an opportunity to buy, especially if you want to come and buy one or two off of us. Maybe you can get a little familiarity with the program, so that you understand that you're buying a real. I mean, this is if in anything, I would say buying these reverse mortgages reminds me a lot of what it was like to buy upside down mortgages in 2009. And the beauty of that from an investor perspective is the first lien holder, where your lien is greater than the value of the property. In essence, you own that property. You don't in title. The title's still in the name of the borrower, but you own it. You control it. Nobody can do anything with that piece of real estate without coming to you first. Now, granted, you're going to have to short sale or agree to a reduced payoff if you don't want to take ownership back through foreclosure. And that's a very easy thing for us to assess, right? So, what we do is we look at this in a myriad of ways. At its core, it is a fix and flip strategy. But there is also the added element of dealing with the heirs, dealing with the fact that they are in loan form, that you've got to spend dollars, that you've got to pour more money into getting a clean and marketable title to the property. And so you add those expenses to what you think the timeline is for getting to the foreclosure or getting title cleaned up, and then you add in the repair costs. You subtract all that plus your profits from where you think that property value will be at the time that you sell it. And, that's how you get to a bid level. And on top of that, you are bidding against obviously a huge, group of cohorts at any given time. Maybe there's only been a total of over 9 years. There's only been a total of how many of us that have actually been awarded these things. But there's still a lot of players in the industry. So now you've got, even if there's 6 or 7 of you, you've got to find the price that's enough of a discount to the value of the real estate, but high enough that you're willing to bid that comfortably to where you're going to still beat the others that are bidding against you. So this is obviously easier said than done. One of the things I do want to point to, and we're going to get into momentarily a review of how I'll give you a little bit of a peek behind the eyes of how we value these things, because we're actively bidding one of these portfolios right now. And maybe in a future episode, I'll come back and I will come back and I will give you the good news of how much we were awarded in this upcoming auction here in August of 2025. And then I'll review with you, some of the outcomes without revealing, obviously, anything that I can't reveal. But before we get into that, just kind of an overview of how this auction process works with HUD. You can see this is all public record. There are, of the 16,000 loans that were sold to investors, both for-profit and non-profit investors is in the last 9 years. We're taking this sample of the last. They started asking the investors for more data around 2020, and that's what this is, right? Which is a research of how these loans get resolved. And what's interesting is the way that HUD puts it is total loans resolved total loans resolved into REO is about, in the last 5 years, and these are pretty well resolved asset pools. So, stuff turns over. You can see 85%, 83%. That's the 2020 and 2022 population. So 2022 had 92% and 77% resolved. 2023 population is already almost 80% resolved. We own some stuff in the 23 population. We're about 80% resolved on that as well. I think 75, 80%. So this stuff turns over very quickly, 1 to 2 years. You're buying the loan. But what's interesting is how it turns over and the how HUD reports it turning over. A lot of what HUD has tried to do is insert, ways to get stuff sold to home end users versus investors. We've participated very wholeheartedly in that. We agreed to openly market our real estate to end users within the first 30 days before we consider to accept any investor offers. I mean, this is a counter to where the market was for so long, where investors were just beating out regular homeowners. I do believe that those chickens are coming home to roost for investors, and it's unfortunately going to have a negative impact on the market going forward. But it is interesting how HUD buries this kind of REO resolution versus non-REO resolution because, oh, listen, we sell these things and then they get resolved in other ways and it's just a great outcome. Only 50 to 70, 60% of ours are actually going through REO. Well, the reality is that's not true. If you look here, loans sold at foreclosure to a third party, well, that's the same thing as REO. So it's really these two figures added together is how most people are resolving these deals. They're either foreclosing, and it just goes to prove it's a fix and flip trade. You've got about 80% of the stuff that gets resolved by either a sale to an investor through a third party foreclosure sale or by us taking the property back as the lender investor, fixing it up, or selling it as is to the open market. One thing I do want to point out that is very unique, very interesting, is this Deed-in-Lieu figure. And this is something we point to with our partners. We have a very high record of Deed-in-Lieu ourselves. Deed-in-Lieu of foreclosure is when you can go to the personal representative of the estate, or you can find the heirs and you get them all together and you get them to whoever's the beneficiaries of the title of this property, and you get them to agree to give you deed to title to the property in lieu of you having to go through a foreclosure action. Now, these are non-recourse loans, so you can't say, oh, well, we'll waive the deficiency. There is no deficiency. But we can incentivize the estate if they were upside down and they were getting nothing, and we can go to them and say, listen, we're going to give you, we know you're getting nothing. There's no reason for you to spend money to close to if this was your only asset and it's upside down. I tell you what, we're gonna pay for the legal to take the deed, and we're gonna give you another $10,000 or $15,000 just to heal the wounds a little bit about this situation. And so we have a very high Deed-in-Lieu rate, unlike anyone else in the business. I would say our Deed-in-Lieu rate is close to 50%. So we actually are streamlining our systems. We're spending a lot less time foreclosing on estates, a lot less time in the courts, and it's a lot less hassle and pain for the heirs, I think. And it also brings products back to the market very quickly. So I want to share with you a example of what some of the diligence that we're doing here. We get these access to these BPOs and these inspections, but what we do obviously is we send our people out to the physical properties, just to give you an idea of the size and scope of what we are looking at right now. Um, this is the pool that we are bidding in just a week or two from now, and so I will give you some results later. The original pool offering was 1,500 and something assets. These are single family homes, condos, all across America. So 1,500 of them, a couple $100 million of balance. And, just to give you, and this will give you, I want to take you through some of the data on these because it's going to give you a little idea for those of you who watched part one of this, how the reverse mortgage program works. You might be asking questions. By the way, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments in the chat. We will check the comments on anything, especially on YouTube and Spotify. If you have any comments or questions, you can also hit us up, billbymel.com, for any questions or comments. But let's just share with you. This was a narrowed down pool from 1,500. We ended up doing diligence on close to 900 assets. And one of the things, again, without giving away too much of the secret sauce, one of the things that we do is we grade every asset. So we determine the key to bidding a larger number of assets is that you have to not make mistakes. You need to eliminate any possibility of mistake or minimize the risks, minimize any downside risks. And when you're starting to bid large populations, where you're looking at bidding somewhere close to 65, 70% of the value of these properties. That was the other thing I didn't share with you, was the data on where these things trade, and we'll get back to that in a second. I wonder if there's let me pull that. So okay, so here's the pool that we've narrowed down to. Just to give you, I blacked out the addresses here just to keep, some level of privacy for any heirs that might be out there whose pools there are. It's interesting that that the government's kind of pulled a lot of the statistics on what these things have sold for, and have really refocused the data on what the outcomes have been in terms of resolutions. But just to give you an idea, these things sell somewhere in the 60s to 70s of the HUD BPO value, the HUD as is VPO value. Like in the case of this, let me see if I can get that number. Well, in the case of these 737 graded assets, there's about half the pool that we actually put a grade on. And our proprietary method for grading things has to do with the demographics of the market, the type of real estate you're dealing with, the value comparative, our value, our agent's value, and our reconciled value comparative to HUD's value. You see, we're looking at those figures over here in the right column: agent value to seller value, or FLC value to seller value, and then a couple of other factors that play a role. But we actually are reviewing inspection reports. I'll take you into one particular property as an example in a moment. But just to give you an idea of how these things work, I want to point you to this column. And for those of that are just listening, I'm going to walk you through it. The columns I want to point you to is when we get this data from HUD, is we get two balances. We get what they call the unpaid principal balance, which is really the origination balance of the loan. The wording is, they use the same words for different meanings in the reverse world, because in the reverse mortgage HECM world, there's no payments incoming. There's no paying down the loan. So I've renamed it the original balance. What HUD calls the unpaid principal balance is the original balance. So this is the balance that was taken out by the borrower including fees and costs, at the time that the loan was originated. And for most of these assets, you got to realize that was 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or in some cases 30 years ago. But the program has only been around since 1990, right? So it's only been around 35 years. I don't know if there's a record out there for who's outlived this program the longest. That'd be interesting to get into. But in most cases, you've got people in their 60s, and the average person now today is living into their 80s. So it's, a 10 to 15 year period. These have about a 10 to 15-year age. So think of it from the point of view of these mortgages having been taken out in 2015 or 2010, or when the market was, lower, obviously much lower than it is today. Well, if you look at, like, for instance, this home in Ocala, you've got a $129,000 original balance. The HUD is saying this property is worth 340 today. We don't agree. We think it's worth 275. And the reason we think it's worth 275 is that if that the total debt on it, because now 10 years later, now think about this. This is the difference between what I talked about was the unpaid principal original balance of 129 and the total debt now of 275,000. So it is more than doubled since its origination, but that's an accrual of principal and interest over a 10 or a 15-year period. Now, if the HUD's value was right on this and it was really worth 340, chances are that the heirs to this estate would come along and sell the property. It could be that this is a property that had no heirs, so maybe it does have equity and it's just sitting out there waiting for someone to come along and buy that loan and work that out. But that just gives you a little bit of an idea. Let me go down the list just to show that this is a regular thing. Here's a home in Jacksonville, Florida, that built in 1990. This is a nice home, 1,700 square feet. The original balance of the reverse was 133,000. Today, the total debt is 445,000. So we're buying $445,000 worth of debt. Now we think the property is only worth 250,000. So we're going to pay some reduced number compared to the total debt, maybe 35 cents on the dollar. It doesn't even matter. We're going to pay 60, 70% of the BPO value of that property. And we're going to figure out what that bid level will be based upon our modeling, based upon what we think the real value is, and then looking at HUD's inspections and stuff like that. So I'm just going to take a moment, and before this gets too long-winded, just go through one example of a property that we are looking at, like for instance in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and then we'll review this one, some of the inspections on this, and again, this will kind of give you the picture of how we dig into each one of this. Imagine us doing this on 800 houses, and we have about a 30-day period between the time that HUD gives us the data and the time that we have to bid on the auction. So here's a home in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Now, for those that don't know New Jersey, Cherry Hill is a very nice suburb of the New York City area. It's close to Morristown, New Jersey. This is a town that's a town where my wife grew up. A very nice upper class neighborhood. Still very popular. Both Cherry Hill and Morristown, they're all close to New Jersey Transit Station. So it's about an hour train into New York City. But it's beautiful, very wooded. George Washington had one of his first encampments was in Morristown. There's a lot of, I think, there's a lot of memorials to Washington and whatnot. Cherry Hill is very near there. For those that are shoppers, the Cherry Hill, New Jersey mall, Cherry Hill Mall is always the most popular place in all of Jersey. So this is a 1960 build, 4 bedroom, 4 bath, 2,600 square feet, and it's on about a 3/4 acre of land. What's interesting about this one and why I pointed out is that our agent's value came in significantly higher, for almost over 100,000 higher than HUD's value. But there we also thought that that could have something to do with the the condition of the property, and so that's when we go in and we take a look at condition of the property. So then at that point, when we see that kind of differential, we want to like look at the inspections. And in the case of this property, it turned out that this is you take a look at it. It's pretty blah on the outside. You can see that it looks like it needs some work, and the roof we may need a new roof. The neighborhood is nothing. It's nice. Oh, but then you look down there, and wow, there's some nice houses, lots of families with basketball courts. Well, Cherry Hill's a pretty desirable area. Okay, that's another nice house over there. Okay, so now we start looking at it. Now, this is so what's the actual condition of this property? Um, by the way, if you look down at the comps in this area, just kind of give you an idea. 500,000, 550, 485, 465. 438. Now those are probably repaired homes. So like let's say top end of the market you're looking at 550 for what that doesn't even look like our place. But okay, so now we go to the inspection, and luckily there's some inspections that were just done in June of this year. So you can see again, it's more of a cosmetic thing. I don't think the house is gorgeously appealing. This is your typical 1960s ranch house. And lo and behold, you get inside and you can see that this is how these homes get left. There's a little peek inside, there's still clothes left in there, and stuff all over the floor, furniture that no one wanted. Even if the heirs came, they probably saw no value in this stuff, so they just left it. And now it's been securitized by HUD, so as a protectionary measure. Very dated. I love that porcelain bathrooms. So, yeah, it's probably worth, in the threes as is, but it definitely has potential. I mean, homes of this size, 2,500 square feet in Cherry Hill. Up and now you can see some problems here. You can see there's a roof leak. Yep, the roof definitely. We had a feeling by looking at the outside it needed a roof. You can see the damage to the roof here in the living room. So it needs a work. You can't get away. This is why HUD's BPO came in so light, 300,000. But lo and behold, there's a pool there too. Wow. So you're now talking about a 3/4 of an acre pool home in a very good demographic of New Jersey. Yeah, you're gonna have to put a new roof on. So that's 50 grand. You're gonna have to redo the interior. That's 100 grand. So minimum 150 you're putting into it. 150 into it, and then unfinished basement. 150 into it. This stuff, there are comps. Kitchen's got to be redone. There are comps to support up to 700,000 for a repaired one of these homes. It's got a central AC. It's got a pool. It needs a little exterior landscape and some stonework. 3/4 of an acre in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, fixed up. This thing's worth 650. Our agent even says 700, maybe even more. So do we believe him? Let's go with the 650 number, right? So if I go back to my sheet, 650 number, repaired, 150 rehab. So that's down to 500. Let's say 200 rehab. So 450 net. What can you pay for that? Well, what do you want to make? 100, 150,000 on the thing? That means that we could bid, wow, 300,000 maybe, and still make a nice return on that deal. Lo and behold, HUD's BPO value, remember, on this was only 300 as is. Now, it's probably because of the excess repairs that are necessary here. But this may just be an opportunity for us. This may just be one where it's not going to take more than 200,000 to repair this. We can maybe make 550, 600. So we can bid pretty close to what HUD's BPO value was. And that might be a way for us to guarantee we win it, because everyone else might not have done the research and they may just use HUD's BPO of 300,000 and say, you know what, we're going to bid 80% of HUD's BPO or 75% of HUD's BPO. And even then, they're not bidding enough. Now, the reverse is true throughout this pool. We look at stuff that HUD's BPO is way over what we think the value of this real estate is worth. And we've seen it in trends. To give you some idea of how that's looking, you can actually see it in the States. You can see it in areas of Maryland, certain aspects of DC, the numbers have come down. Florida, way down. We're starting to see a real pullback in valuations in Florida. And where are some of the other markets? The Carolinas were pretty bad. Illinois, you always get hit or miss in Illinois. It gets a bad rep, but there's some real opportunity. We love the Midwest, but it's hard to find value. It's hard to find. Michigan's overvalued on HUD's numbers. Minnesota's probably got some value in it. But as you scroll down, you can see that the values are not always in compliance. Anything that we look at here, for those that aren't seeing, we have value adjustments. What our value is comparative to what HUD says these things are worth. We've got a lot of cases where we're going in and doing the research, and we're seeing the opposite of the case I just showed you. And that's actually the majority of the cases where we can go in and we'll see that whoever the broker was that did this valuation for HUD was just way off the mark. And we needed to, not bid on that. And that's where you can really get yourself into trouble when you're bidding these large pools. And that's one of the secret sauces of how we've grown this. And this will be our 5th auction that we participate in with HUD this year. And we're looking forward to, the results of it. I'll keep you all abreast of it. But we're also looking forward to buying these things at just the right price, where we can make a good return and we can deliver this quality real estate product back to the market. That's it for the HUD HECM. I think that we kind of covered everything that's going on with this HUD Office of Asset Sales and the HUD HECM sale program. I'm recording this on a Sunday before our next auction takes place this week. So wish me luck that we have a good outcome. And thank you for listening. I hope you like what you see here. If you do, please subscribe, please share, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Debt Doctor. That's a wrap of today's episode of Debt Doctor. I enjoy bringing this content to you each and every week, and I really appreciate you tuning in. Remember to follow us so you get notified whenever new episodes release. If you haven't already done so, please share one of your favorite episodes with a friend, family, or colleagues. And if you don't mind, leave us a positive review on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your favorite listening platform might be. Until next time, thank you for investing your time with us on The Debt Doctor.